Hello and welcome to the channel. Welcome here in Umoja. My name is Dennis Uhuru, and it's not business as usual, is it? We've all seen what has happened. We've seen the pictures, we've heard the stories. Some of us were on the streets, you know.
Kila mtu chini bana. Kwani ni life bullet?
We are at this very moment at a crossroads. We have to have these conversations. After all, we only have one country to live in. We only have Kenya. We don't have any other country. We cannot go to Tanzania. We cannot go to Uganda. We have to live in Kenya. And I didn't think that today I'd be able to, wake up and say, welcome here in Umoja, and, go about my business as usual with everything that is going on. I thought I'd sit here and, talk about it, give my 2 cents about it. I'm just a YouTuber. My 2 cents doesn't count for much. But the beauty of having these conversations is if enough people talk about what is going on, then collectively, at least, our voices amount to something. But if we keep quiet, then nothing changes when people are silent. You have to, speak. So let us talk about what is going on. Let us have these conversations so that we are able to reach a consensus on the way forward. And I feel that more and more people should talk about this. If you're a Kenyan citizen, whichever space that you occupy, have these conversations. Talk about what is going on in Kenya, and hopefully we're able to find a solution to the very real problems that are facing us. So what is going on? Let us begin from there. 90% of my viewership is from Kenya. The rest is, of course, international. So some of them may not even know what is going on. So for their sake, very briefly, I'll run you through what is going on. The start of all this began a few years ago. You see, the thing is, every government that comes into power often comes into power on the wings of hope, for lack of a better word, right? No one ever says that things are okay as they are when they want to come into power. Everyone often says they will improve things, we will do this for the people. And the current government, when it came into power, issued many promises. The biggest of which was that there would be a bottom-up government. A government for the people in the lowest ranks of the society. They call themselves hustlers, and of course Kenya is made mainly of people who are, struggling to get by. Hustlers, for lack of a better word. Most of us are struggling to get by day by day, and we are doing the best that we can. So for most people, when the government said it was a government for the people in the lowest ranks of the society, it was a government for hustlers, they really bought into that narrative. They bought into that narrative and they supported the government thinking that, things would change. And that is where the problems began. That is where the problems began. Last year, in 2024, there was a finance bill that was promulgated by the people in power, by the government, and it was to be passed in parliament. And the young people in the country who make up the bulk of Kenyans felt that, that new a finance bill would make life more difficult for us. You have to think about it from the perspective of a young person. So most of these young people, are coming out of university. They are, in a very real sense, at the most difficult and most confusing time of their lives. Because if you think about it, we've been told, ever since we were little, we were told in school that go to school, get good grades, then come out of school, get into the job market, and for sure, if you get good grades, if you do well in school, if you go to the university, you've set up your life correctly. And things can only go, one way for you. Things can only go upwards for you. You only have to do well in school and your life will be set up correctly. And this is the frustration the young people have, is that we've done our part. We've gone to school, we've gone to university. We want to get into the world, for lack of a better word, and interact with it, set up our lives, see what we can do, get something for ourselves and to support ourselves and to support our families. Maybe get married at some point, start our own families, just do this thing called life. And it breaks the heart of a young person to see excesses in government, to see corruption so rampant that those perpetrating it don't care to hide it anymore. We've seen government officials, parading their vehicles, their luxury houses, their luxury watches and all these things. And yet, all of us know the salaries of all government officials. We know the salaries of government officials, from the lowest person to the highest. We know how much they are paid. And we're able to see that what you're parading, what you're showing, does not match your remuneration. There is nowhere else you could get this money from apart from our taxes. People lost their lives, and more were abducted by, security forces and tortured, and, all manner of ills were done to them. When they passed it, the people that were outside protesting felt that they had to go to parliament. And so young people went up and breached parliament through the thick of police opposition that had been deployed in the streets, and tear gas and water cannons, and rubber bullets, and sometimes even live bullets. And they went to parliament and got into parliament. But during all these skirmishes, of course, many young people lost their lives. So that was 25th of June 2024. There was a young man called Albert Ojwang who expressed certain opinions that rubbed powerful people in government the wrong way, and he put those opinions on social media. He was arrested in his home in Homa Bay by security forces and brought to Nairobi and killed in the police cells. If you did not know, if you are not in Kenya listening to this, if you had this anywhere else in the world, you would think it's a movie. You would question the very things you are hearing, because it's a misnomer to match this, to marry these two things. How can somebody be killed in a police cell? The two things don't go together. Kenyans felt that that was not right. And this, of course, provoked protests, and protests began. But yesterday, being 25th of June 2025, there was a protest that was scheduled to commemorate the people that lost their lives in, the protests of last year. But the protests got out of hand, and we've all seen what has happened. We witnessed violence between members of the public and the police. It was as if the police and the citizens were at war. And that doesn't make sense, because the police is an authority that is constituted to make the citizens safe. This very element, this very institution that is supposed to make the people safe, turned on the people. Some people were shot dead by the police. So much violence. And worst of all, at night we heard that women were raped, and I'm like, what comes upon a man to do such a thing? These rapists, have they not mothers and sisters and aunties? Who raises such a man, and who unleashes these men into the society? And let me say this to these rapists. I want to say to the rapists, if you're a rapist, if you took someone's daughter, and violated her in this way, then peace has departed your life. You will never know peace. Never again. Because why would you do such a thing? Why would you do such a thing? We have within our power the means to make a workable society for all of us. We also have within us the ability to turn the land into chaos. And the thing is, we have seen examples of failed states all around us. Africa is full of countries that have seen uprisings and, revolts, of the likes of which Kenya has not seen. And we've seen the results of those places. We have for a very long time been a bastion of hope for countries around East Africa and even Central Africa. Kenya has been regarded as one of the best countries to live in for a very long time because of the hardworking nature of our people, because of the rule of law in our country. And many people have said, I would like to go live in Kenya. And we've even seen mass immigrations of, people from even countries like the US, some black Americans coming to live in Kenya, because for a very long time Kenya has been a very good place to live in. But you see, we fail to realize the alternative, what is on the other side. There are countries in Africa that have failed. There are countries in Africa that are hell to live in. We have seen hell presented to us, and we've been told, choose this way, do what is right, or go to hell. And if we are not careful, we will choose to go to hell if we do not handle what is happening correctly. And let me not lie to you, when excesses are allowed to go on without a voice that stands up to talk against it, and when the rule of law is abandoned and power for power's sake takes charge, it will be terrible for all of us. It is not too late. We can still mitigate this. We can still come up and say, this is what we want for our land and nation, Kenya, in the spirit of our national anthem. What people want is a system that works, a government led by people who will not steal our money, so that if taxes are paid and Kenyans pay taxes, so much money, that money will be directed to the right cause. We will not see government officials flaunting wealth that is ill-gotten, that is stolen from our taxes. We do not want to see that. And no one wants to see that. We all want a system that works. We want to be assured that when you are sick, you can go to hospital. And the systems that are set in place for the healthcare system will help you, be able to get better in those hospitals. We want to go to school and know that, and the systems that are set in place for the education system to work will work. We want to be assured that if you have legal grievances and you go to the courts, that the systems that are set up in the judiciary to help you get justice will work. We want that you are assured that if you're going to travel around Kenya, that the systems that are set in place for the transport industry, the roads are good, and you're not harassed on the highways by the police seeking bribes for things that, We want a system that works. That is all we are asking for, and it is not too much to do. It can be done. It can be done. Systems can be made to work. Systems can be made to work. And sometimes when people in power are in power and they are doing what they are doing, they think that they will get away with it. There is no getting away with it. You cannot escape the day of reckoning. You cannot escape your punishment if you are in positions of power and you are abusing those positions. And that brings me to this next chapter. Let me talk about kings and what happens when you abuse power. There was a man called King David. King David was an accomplished man, by all respects, a famous warrior. At one point he killed a giant called Goliath and saved his country. He was a great man in all respects, chosen by God to lead the nation of Israel. And for a long time David did a very good job. But I want to tell you about the time that David abused his power, his position, and the punishment that he faced. And the punishment was so dire that if you hear about it and you're in a position of power, if you are wise, you will change your ways. You will change your ways. So this is what happened to King David. One time, the armies of Israel had gone to war, but David, as the commander-in-chief, had stayed behind and let his warriors go to war. And I like to think that David's palace had a flat roof, like the roofs we have in Umoja. So one time David was on the flat roof of his palace, just surveying the land. As David was relaxing on the rooftop of his palace, he saw a beautiful woman bathing, This was the most beautiful woman David had ever seen. Oh my goodness, she was lovely. It is said she was the most beautiful woman in the land. And the interesting thing is, at this very moment, David had more than 3 wives already in the palace, rightfully and legally his wives. But the moment he saw this beautiful woman bathing from his rooftop, he forgot all that, He was mesmerized by this woman. And so he called one of his advisors to him and told him, find out who that woman is, and report back to me. And this advisor did as he had been asked and found out that this woman was called Bathsheba, and he reported back to David. That woman, Your Highness, that you sent me to find out about is Bathsheba. And she's married to one of your mighty men, one of your soldiers called Uriah. And Uriah was a soldier in David's army, a distinguished warrior, numbered among the mighty men of David's army. So, these were the best warriors that David had, the most loyal, right? And this advisor told David that this beautiful woman is married to Uriah, one of your mighty men. And at that very moment, I can picture the frustration in David's heart and mind. I'm sure he was like, oh, all the beautiful women are taken. But, even though David was given this information, And oftentimes what happens is that we are often given information. We often know when we are going to do something that is wrong. We are presented with this information beforehand. So David knew that Bathsheba was married to one of his most loyal soldiers, but that did not concern him. He told his advisors, go and tell Bathsheba to come to me. And Bathsheba, when she was told that she was being summoned by King David, she came and she had to go. I'm thinking maybe she didn't even know what she was being summoned for. But even if she knew, if the king summons you, you have to go to the king. So she went to the king, and David took advantage of his position as king and slept with this woman, Bathsheba, and then sent her home. Okay? And this is where the problems started for David. A few months later, Bathsheba sent a report to David that she was pregnant. And now David was in a dilemma. What do you do when you've slept with the wife of one of your most loyal men and she's pregnant? How do you handle that? And oftentimes when you've done a bad thing, you're presented with options. You can do the right thing, or you can try to cover it up. And sometimes for men in power, they feel that a cover-up is the wisest thing they can do. They are so confident in their position that for them, admitting the wrong they've done is alien to them. It's like it's not an option. So this is what David did. He sent for Uriah. Uriah was still in battle. So he sent for Uriah to come back home. And he was not told why he was coming home. But Uriah, the same way Bathsheba obeyed, Uriah obeyed and came back home and presented himself to the king. And he was like, Your Highness, you sent for me to come back from the battle. Is there anything you need of me or you want of me? And David told him, I've had reports that you're doing very well in battle. I want to give you a few days off. I want you to go back home, spend some time with your wife, have a good time, and then you go back to battle. David's plan was such that if Uriah went back home, of course, he'd sleep with his wife, and then the pregnancy would be attributed to Uriah. So that was David's $1 million plan to cover up this thing that he'd done. Uriah was very pleased. Uriah said, thank you, my king, for giving me a few days off. Right? And Uriah left. But the very next morning, a report was made to King David, and he was told that Uriah, whom you gave a few days off, did not go home. He slept by the palace gates. He refused to go home. And David summoned Uriah and was like, I gave you a few days off. Why didn't you go home? And Uriah was like, I can't go home, my king. I've left my brothers in battle. There's no way I can go home to sleep with my wife, and my brothers are in the battlefield. So I will not go home. I will spend my time by the gates, and when the days that you've given me are over, I'll go back to battle. And so David's plan to cover up this misdeed he'd done was foiled. And so David had to come up with a new plan. And that is the other thing again, is that whenever you do a wrong thing, you're given opportunities to set it right. You're given many opportunities. Pharaoh was given 10 opportunities. That is a story for another day. So this is what happened. David sent Uriah back to battle. And he sent a report to the commander of his armies, and he said, the next time you go to confront the enemy, put Uriah at the very front, at the vanguard of the army. And when you make contact with the enemy, withdraw and leave Uriah by himself so that he can be killed. And that is what the commander of David's army did. He put Uriah at the vanguard, at the very front of the army, and when they made contact with the military, with the enemy, he withdrew his forces. And Uriah was left by himself, and he was killed. And David, after some time, took Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, and married her, and made her his wife. And he thought that everything was taken care of and he was now in a good position. Some time passed and someone was sent to King David to reproach him, to tell him of the punishment that was awaiting him, because of course God had witnessed everything that David had done. And like I said, kings are set in positions where only God can punish them, and the punishment of God is severe. I had not wished it on any man. So Prophet Nathan went to David, and this is what Prophet Nathan said to David. There are two men that live side by side. One of them is a very rich man, the other is not a rich man. This rich man has plenty of livestock, The poor man has only one animal, let's call it a donkey. So the poor man has one donkey, but the rich man has very many donkeys. But the thing is, the rich man likes the poor man's donkey, and he looks at the poor man's donkey and forgets about the rest of his donkeys, and he just wants that one donkey that the poor man owns. And so he goes and takes that donkey the poor man owns, and he takes it by force and then kills the poor man. And the prophet asks David, what should we do to such a man? What should we do to such a man? And David very quickly renders judgment. David says, bring that man here so that we can kill him right now. And the prophet tells him, the rich man is none other than you, my king. You are the one who've done what I've just said. And you're the one who should be done for what you've just said. At that moment, David's eyes are opened and he sees what is done. He's taken Bathsheba, Uriah's wife, and had Uriah killed. And so this prophet Nathan asks David, God has given me two options for your punishment, and he's told me that you should choose what happens to you. Do you want to be punished by God, or do you want to be punished by men? Should God give you into the hands of your enemies so that they can punish you, or do you want your punishment to come directly from God? And David said some very wise words. He said, let my punishment come from God, because men have no mercy. At least God, even if he punishes me, he has some mercy. At some point he will say enough is enough. And so Nathan says, all right, your punishment will come from God. And David's punishment was so severe, that anyone in power who abuses power should think twice, think 3 times, think 5 times, my friend, because when the day of reckoning comes, your position will not save you. Nothing will save you. Not your position, not your connections, not who you know where. Nothing will save you when the day of reckoning comes. When God puts a cross and communicates your punishment, nothing will save you. This is what happened to King David. Like I said in the beginning, David had many wives, and for that reason he had many children by these different wives. Alright? So a daughter was born to David who was very beautiful. And the funny thing about God's punishment is he punishes you in almost the exact same way that you are punishing somebody else. So a very beautiful girl was born to King David. When that happened, one of this girl's brothers, one of David's sons from another mother, saw this girl, this stepsister of his, and was consumed by desire for her, and this was a sister of his, of course, a stepsister, But this son of David, just like David with Bathsheba, was not concerned with that. And this son of David took his stepsister and raped her. And so that was the first punishment David had to go through. His daughter was raped. And his daughter was raped by none other than one of his sons. Okay? Look at how tragic that is. So David's daughter was raped. Okay? And once had been done, this girl that was raped had a brother, now a brother from the same mother, you know. And when this girl's brother, his name was Absalom, when he found out that his sister had been raped by one of his stepbrothers, his anger was so much so that he went and took this rapist and killed him. So that was the second punishment that David had to endure. His son that raped his daughter was killed by another son of his. Okay? Right, so that happened. And then, after Absalom had killed his rapist brother, Absalom started a civil uprising. And Absalom said that he wanted to take over the kingdom of his father by force. And Absalom amassed forces and started a civil war against his father David. And the result of that war is that Absalom was able to run David out of the capital city. And then Absalom was advised by his advisors that if you want to take over your father's kingdom, you have to sleep with his wives, so that everyone in the kingdom will know that you've taken over, you're a real man. And that is what Absalom did. Absalom, it is said, made a tent out in the open and slept with his father's wives out in the open so that everyone could see that he'd taken over his father's position. So that was the third punishment David had to go through. His son slept with his wives. Alright? And then, this was such an affront to David that when David's commanders caught up with Absalom, they killed him. So that was the fourth punishment David had to go through, is that his second son again was killed by none other than his soldiers. So I'll recap for you. David's daughter was raped. And then the rapist, who was David's son, was killed. And then the person that killed this rapist, who was David's other son, slept with David's wives in public in front of everyone. And then this son, Absalom, was again killed. So David lost two sons and his daughter was raped. And his wives were slept with out in the open. And the most interesting thing is that David was a man so loved by God that it is said he was a man after God's own heart. And that was David's punishment. That was the punishment for such a man that God loved so much. It is not for me to say how much God loves or hates you. I do not know. But what I know for sure is you're not greater than King David. You're not greater than King David. Do not feel as if you have the world under you. Do not feel as if you cannot be brought to account in that position of power you occupy. The day of reckoning will come. You cannot escape it. There is nothing you can do to escape the day of reckoning. When God's judgment is set, when it is decided by God that you are to be punished, nothing will save you. Nothing will save you. But it is not too late. It is not too late. You can put things right even now. Alright? There is a scientist called Euclid, one of the premier scientists in science. And Euclid had many statements that he came up with. They are called Euclid's notions, Euclid's first common notion is that things which are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. And you have to think about that. Things which are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that we start with justice. We start with fairness. That if one thing is equal to another, it should be treated in the exact same manner that this other thing is treated. If you take a man in a mortuary, for example, and you strip him naked, you will observe that this man, if he died through natural causes and not through accidents or other things that disfigured him, you will observe that this man has 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head, and between his legs a very shriveled penis. And you will make that observation and realize that this man is a man like any other man. No man is buried with his title. What does that mean? It means that we are equal. Things which are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. It starts with fairness, it starts with justice. Let he who has ears listen. But you need to realize that at the very fundamental level, all of us are trying to make our way in this world. And you also need to realize that there is an authority above which there is no authority. And that authority will make his presence known. That authority will make his presence known. And lastly, you need to realize that no matter the opposition you occupy in society, no matter your title, no one is buried with his title. In a previous video, I talked about how I witnessed a man die of cancer. At that moment, that when you get to that level, there are no titles, there are no friends. You do not go with your wife, you do not go with your children, you do not go with your spheres of influence. You face this final door by yourself. And you will be made to account for everything that you did that was not right. This is to our leaders. Realize that things which are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. We are all men. We are all trying to make our headway in this, world. This is a country that is coming out to speak about the ills that are being perpetrated. They are speaking about wanting a fair opportunity. If you're in a position of power and you're able to do all that is in your power to make the field a level playing field. That's all people are asking for. We just want a level playing field. And then we are able to go into that field and do our very best to set up our lives for ourselves. That is what we want, a level playing field. If you're in a position of power and you've been elected by people to level the playing field, because we know people are talented in different ways, but if the playing field is level, then all of us are able to take advantage of our talents in these different ways and push forward and make of our lives a good thing for our families, for the people that depend on us, That is all we are asking for. That is all we are asking for. So, that was today's video. Thank you for watching it. I'll leave your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know what you think. If this is your first time to the channel, subscribe to the channel. And then I'll see you in the next video.